camps, used as human shields at military bases, even dressed in Serb uniforms. But we don't know. And I think this is an area where we should be allowed to know. We also have reports that those Kosovo Albanians who cooperated with the international presence in Kosovo, notably the OSCE, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, as bodyguards, drivers, cooks, interpreters, translators, have also been targeted. Again, we would like to know what has happened to them. Moreover, it's clear that the strategy of creating a series of ghost towns throughout Kosovo continues. The latest example is Pristina, the major city, where 30,000 people have been rounded up and forced to leave in the last 24 hours. This refugee situation means that we are no longer facing an internal Yugoslav crisis. We are facing a crisis of the entire region with far-reaching consequences. And therefore NATO has to address this situation alongside our efforts to do what we can to halt the violence in Kosovo quickly and thereby create the conditions for the refugees to turn around and to go back and to try to rebuild their lives. And the focus of the ambassadors' meeting this morning, ladies and gentlemen, was very much on what can we do rapidly, urgently, to mobilize our resources to help deal with this refugee calamity which is now facing the entire region. As you know, I reported on this just a short while ago. We have a team from NATO headquarters Southern Europe in Albania assessing the needs. The Italian government has sent its San Marco battalion to Albania to help with the immediate task of food distribution, building tent cities, dealing with sanitation and medical assistance. The Greek forces that have been in Albania helping the government for some time are also being redeployed to this effort. This morning, the North Atlantic Council directed SACEUR, General Clark, to in turn direct General Jackson, the commander of NATO's enabling force in the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, to do whatever he can within his means and capabilities to use the NATO soldiers there to assist with the inflow of refugees, particularly with the border crossings. And we will be doing whatever we can there immediately and in the very near future. At the same time, this morning, the NATO military authorities were tasked to look on an urgent basis at additional things that we may be able to do to support the United Nations High Commission for Refugees with logistics, with transport, with planning, with any other type of activity which the military tends to be able to do well in these type of situations. And I will be reporting on this subject, of course, in coming
Kosovo-Albaner aus ihrer Heimat. Präsident Milosevic und seine Militärs im serbischen Fernsehen allgegenwärtig. Die Propagandamaschinerie läuft auf Hochtouren. Jeder ungeklärte Zwischenfall wird als Erfolg verkauft. Hier sei angeblich ein NATO-Flugzeug abgeschossen worden. Kritiker des Regimes wurden mundtot gemacht. Auch Radio B92, der Belgrader Sender, galt als zuverlässige Informationsquelle über Jugoslawien. Nur wenige Stunden nach dem Einsatzbefehl der NATO hat ein Dutzend Polizisten B92 dicht gemacht. Jetzt informieren die Reporter ihre Hörer über das Internet. Aber nur wenige Menschen in Belgrad können ihre unzensierten Berichte empfangen. Aber selbst hier im Internet tummelt sich die staatliche Propaganda. Statt ausgewogener Information, Nationalhymne und Wappen, vermengt mit Kriegsberichterstattung. Angeblich sind schon 8 NATO-Flugzeuge abgeschossen worden, nicht nur eines. Und die Kosovo-Albaner seien nun mal Terroristen. Die gezielte Desinformation zeigt Wirkung. Das deutsche Goethe-Institut in Belgrad ist schon seit Tagen geschlossen. Die Wut der Serben richtet sich gegen alle NATO-Länder. Ganz im Sinn der staatlichen Propaganda.
But first, the United Nations Refugee Agency, UNHCR, says the flood of ethnic Albanian refugees being driven out of Kosovo is reaching dramatic proportions. NATO says well over 600,000 people, a third of the entire population of Kosovo, has now been displaced. As NATO airstrikes continue, President Milosevic is reported to have asked Russia for military help. Meanwhile, Serbia says an investigation has begun into the case of 3 captured US soldiers. There are suggestions the 3 may be accused of spying or invading Yugoslav territory.
More damage of the 10th night of the NATO bombardment. NATO itself says it's making progress despite bad weather. With more specific details released today, it says it's hitting Yugoslav fuel supplies and believes the Serb authorities could soon have serious problems.
I would like to show you some footage of one of the bridges that we have recently dropped. First, let me show you the view from the cockpit. From the second clip, kindly produced by Serbian television, and for which we are very grateful, you will note that the civilian housing either side of the bridge is undamaged, evidence of the precision of our attacks.
B-1 bombers returned to their base in England after strikes on Yugoslav targets. NATO says it's now achieving its aims, but perhaps not as quickly as it had hoped. Janet Barry, BBC News.
The Kosovo Liberation Army is alleging that the Serbs have carried out the mass execution of more than 130 Kosovo Albanians. The report, it claims, is based on the accounts of 3 men who survived the attack. They say that Serb police and paramilitary units separated the men from the women and children in the village of Libenik. The women and children were forced to flee in the direction of Dekani. It's reported the Serbs opened fire with machine guns after the men were moved away from their families. The allegations were made by Ramesh Haradinaj from the Kosovo Liberation Army.
Early in the morning, the military and paramilitary people came in the village. They made everyone separated, the ladies and the children. They sent in the direction to the Johnny, and the men, they was executed in the place. The number exact is it more of 130 people. It can be still 150. These 3 people too, they was in the group or to being executed, but they had a chance, so they was safe. They are bonded, and now they are going okay. This is the information that was happened yesterday. It was 1st of April in a village called Libenik in the east, the side of Dejani.
Are you saying that the Serbs came to this village yesterday? They separated.
Yes.
They separated the men. They separated the men and the women and the children, and then executed the men.
Yes, this village in the last summer, it was happened same thing, but it was 12 people. They was massacred, but this time by the knife, not executed by the police forces. No, it was yesterday. This is information what we had, that they was separate and they was executed in the place. 130 people, the man from 14 and more older.
There's been a sharp increase in the number of refugees fleeing Kosovo to neighbouring Macedonia and Albania. Last night, 12,000 reached sanctuary in Albania. Many said they'd been forced from their homes at gunpoint by Serb police or troops. 16 plane loads of relief supplies have arrived in the Albanian capital Tirana. Relief agencies say much more is needed.
Told me, we sleep on the ground, I don't know where we're going. I slept in a school, but I don't have enough food or water. We don't know what's happening.
Aid workers here are increasingly concerned about sanitation. Parts of this square are already becoming an open toilet. But the principal worry is food and water. There's enough here for the local population, but certainly little for these people. Helicopter airlifts of supplies from Tirana are now being actively discussed.
Having bought what food they can locally, the aid agencies need further vast quantities quickly. They're concerned that the 10-hour mountainous road journey from Tirana will take too long for supply lorries and may easily become impassable. Discussions are taking place over establishing 3 transit camps to the south. British tents and blankets that have arrived in the capital have yet to reach here, along with 60 lorries promised by the Albanian army. No such mass movement of people has been seen since the Second World War, other than in Africa's ethnic conflicts. A humanitarian catastrophe of third world proportions is now gathering on the edges of the first. Clarence Mitchell, BBC News, Kukes, Northern Albania.
In Britain, the Secretary of State for Scotland...
The whole Kosovo nation is on the move, a large proportion of them heading for Albania. The government here has been able to provide transport for 8,000 people a day. At the moment, the number is running in excess of 23,000. Fresh food has almost run out in Kukes, but the refugees have nowhere else to go.
Since last year, we are saying the same. We are reporting on this, and now we are in this situation. So it's very bad because we feel frustrated here, because we would like to do more, but this is what, I mean, we can do a bit, but this is not enough.
They arrive tearful and believe they are safe at last, but it's just a matter of time before the full implications of their situation hit home. The stream of people flooding into Albania from Kosovo has not let up. If anything, it continues to increase in number, and the stories they have to tell are horrific.
Si ke emrin ti?
Behare.
Behare, nga po vjen ti Behare?
Nga Zymi.
Ha?
Nga Zymi.
Nga Zymja? Çka ka ndodhur me ty Xhaxhi?
Ne kanë përzonë shtrijat prej shtëpive.
The last word of the Serbian police has been you had wanted to be in Great Albania, so you go straight to Great Albania and forget about Kosovo.
One man collapsed as soon as he crossed the border, the relief of reaching safety proving too much.
Will it be okay?
Yeah, sure.
She needs rest.
An elderly blind woman separated from her family found no mercy from Serb forces.
She's telling his story. She's blonde. She couldn't see, and had been forced out by police, and the rest of her family is in the other direction, and she had been took by police and put in a street side.
The warning signs are clear. Experts on the ground believe unless drastic action is taken quickly, people will start dying here very soon. Ross Appleyard, Sky News, on the Albanian border.
NATO today accused the Serbs of institutionalized gangsterism. The refugee situation is extremely grave, a spokesman said, and becoming graver by the hour. He also challenged Yugoslavia to solve the so-called mystery of the males.
We are extremely worried about what has happened to the men. Will the authorities in Belgrade please tell us, where are all of the Kosovar Albanian men between the ages of 16 and 60? We have reports of them being herded into stadiums and camps, used as human shields at military bases, even dressed in Serb uniforms, but we don't know. And I think this is an area where we should be allowed to know.
Relatives of the 3 captured American soldiers are anxiously awaiting more news tonight. Serb officials say they've begun gathering evidence for the trial, and one report suggests they may appear in court next Wednesday. Sky's US correspondent. It's thought about 100,000 refugees are on the move. Nearly 250,000 people have fled from Kosovo since NATO began its bombing campaign 10 days ago. Albania has already received 130,000 refugees. Macedonia has taken in 70,000. 30,000 have crossed over the border into Montenegro, and 14,000 have travelled to Bosnia.
We start in Macedonia, and Sky's Keith Graves is there and has witnessed these scenes of desperation.
This is Europe on Good Friday 1999. There is a border crossing nearby, but these people were not given the dignity of using it. They were herded across the invisible line that divides Kosovo from Macedonia at gunpoint like cattle. And like animals, they wait in the mud to be, to use the chilling official word, processed. Let no one doubt that Slobodan Milosevic and his regime are bent on ridding themselves of Kosovo's ethnic Albanians. A week ago it might have seemed fanciful. Now it's reality. And NATO's bombs and missiles, and Messrs. Clinton and Blair's condemnations and threats are no deterrent. There are, or rather there were, because tens, maybe hundreds of thousands have already been expelled, 2 million ethnic Albanians in Kosovo. They come by road and their cars are taken from them. They come on foot and their pathetic bundles of possessions are looted. And they come by train, special trains, for people rounded up by the thousand. Everyone has a story. This is Vilsa's.
At about 3:30 yesterday, I can't remember, was it yesterday or day before yesterday? I'm exhausted. We were having lunch, me and my family, and some people came. They were wearing masks and some gun machines, and we were very frightened. They told us to leave and to separate men from women. And I was very frightened because my father and my brothers were there. He told me to give him some money. We were afraid that they were going to kill us or do whatever they want with us.
There are 20,000 in this field, maybe more. There's no shelter, little food or water. Some have been here for 3 days, and even then their ordeal is far from over. They're ordered onto buses and many are taken to Albania. Macedonia does not want them and can't cope with them. The enormity of it all is difficult to comprehend.
This is bad enough, though the word seems totally inadequate to describe it. But think on this. Just over the border, out of sight, are at least 100,000 more people being forced across, and there are more trains arriving all the time. Keith Graves, Sky News, on the Kosovo-Macedonian border.
In Albania, there are urgent calls for more international aid. Sky's Ross Appleyard reports from the border with Kosovo on a country battling to cope with the influx.
A small boy shot in the ear by a Serb bullet, just one of the thousands of people brutalized in their own country. Whole families bloodied and beaten who believe they've reached safety are in for a shock. The situation at the border is now out of control. Aid agencies here have no way of dealing with the constant convoy of refugees. It appears the whole Kosovo nation is on the move, a large proportion of them heading for Albania. The government here has been able to provide transport for 8,000 people a day. At the moment, the number is running in excess of 23,000. Fresh food has almost run out in Kukes, but the refugees have nowhere else to go.
Since last year, we are saying the same. We are reporting on this, and now we are in this situation. So it's very bad because we feel frustrated here because we would like to do more, but this is what, I mean, we can do a bit, but this is not enough.
They arrive tearful and believe they are safe at last, but it's just a matter of time before the full implications of their situation hit home. The stream of people flooding into Albania from Kosovo has not let up. If anything, it continues to increase in number, and the stories they have to tell are horrific.
3 American servicemen changed the US strategy towards this military action at all, do you think?
Jeremy, not in the least bit. There's a recognition here at the Pentagon. There's a demand at the Pentagon that the soldiers be treated humanely under the Geneva Convention, but there seems to be a recognition or an understanding here at the Pentagon that it's quite possible these soldiers may simply have to be prisoners of war throughout the conflict, that it may be until this conflict is entirely over before the soldiers will be released. People here at the Pentagon, officials at the Pentagon, say it has not changed their strategy as far as no use of ground troops, or they're changing in targeting by the airstrikes. They're simply saying that this is simply another matter that will have to be resolved at some point, but it's not changing their strategy one way or the other.
Do you sense that it may have toughened their resolve?
It may toughen their resolve in part depending on how the soldiers are treated. If it ends up that the soldiers have to go through some sort of trial, which people here are describing as a kangaroo court, and that if the soldiers are mistreated in any way, that may in fact strengthen the political resolve or the will of people here at the Pentagon to try to strike Slobodan Milosevic even harder. But at least right now, there's a sense that there's nothing that can really be done. There's still an expansion of the target list. There are more targets in Belgrade that are going to be hit. The weather is supposed to clear up over Serbia in the next couple of days. That will mean an intensification of airstrikes. So as far as the actual strategy is concerned, nothing is really changing. It's not getting stronger, it's not getting weaker because of what's happening with these American soldiers.
You get the sense from reports coming out of Washington that politically the White House may have underestimated just how tough a job they'd taken on. Do you think the military had the same problem, or do you think they had always sensed that this might be a long and difficult campaign?
Jeremy, I think the Pentagon at least sort of recognized that airstrikes were going to take some time, that it was going to take some time to weaken the Yugoslav air defense systems, that an air war by itself may not be able to accomplish all of the different goals that the Clinton administration has. Within the administration, though, there's a recognition, there's an understanding that they seem to have been caught by surprise by how quickly Slobodan Milosevic and the Serb military started going after the ethnic Albanians, and how quickly they started burning the villages and executing leading Albanian politicians and driving everybody towards the border. That's where the surprise is, because nobody in the administration really thought it would happen as fast as it did, and that's why there was a great sense of frustration, not only within the administration, but also at the Pentagon, because everyone here at least knew that it was going to take a certain amount of time to hit the initial targets before they could move on to some more of the actual supply lines of the Serb military, and that it was all going to take some time before they might be able to do anything as far as stopping some of the paramilitary groups on the ground that are carrying out these atrocities. So there's a great sense of frustration that it did move a lot faster than anybody had anticipated.
David Schuster from our sister network, Fox News in the United States, many thanks for joining us from the Pentagon.
You're welcome.
This is Belgrade in flames as NATO steps up the air war on Yugoslavia.
Cruise missiles strike at the very heart of the Milosevic regime.
Serb authorities say innocent victims were put in danger.
Government buildings in central Belgrade have come under attack for the first time from NATO missiles. The US Defense Department said 8 cruise missiles have been fired from ships in the Adriatic. Serbian television ran pictures of blazing buildings and smouldering ruins that were recognizable as the Serbian and Federal Yugoslav interior ministries. The Belgrade authorities complained bitterly about the proximity of the attacks to a large hospital. A number of other targets to the northwest of the city were also reported to have been targeted.
On its 10th day, the war reached the heart of Belgrade. Cruise missiles struck the federal and Serbian interior ministries. It's in these buildings that NATO alleges the ethnic cleansing of Kosovo was planned. The Serbian authorities have long known that these were obvious targets, and both were believed to be empty when the bombs struck. There were no immediate reports of casualties, but one of Belgrade's main hospitals is nearby, and Serb television showed mothers and babies forced to spend the night in bomb shelters. The attack has awoken memories of the last time Belgrade was bombed by Hitler in 1941. Visiting the scene, the Yugoslav interior minister had no hesitation in comparing Bill Clinton to the Nazi leader. It's in this increasingly hostile environment that these 3 American soldiers, captured by the Serb authorities 2 days ago, may face trial later today. NATO has condemned what it says will be a show trial, but it's apparently not prepared to be distracted from its mission. The USS Theodore Roosevelt, which carries 50 aircraft, is heading for the Adriatic now. It will add its firepower to NATO's arsenal. It's another sign that the alliance is preparing for a long campaign. It insists it will continue the bombing as long as it takes until President Milosevic backs down. And as a major European capital burns, the alliance appears to be keeping to its word. Stephen Gibbs, BBC News.
Well, our correspondent Mike
at the beginning of the war.
Well, with me to discuss the latest developments in the NATO campaign is the defence analyst Dr. Martin Navius. Dr. Navius, what do you make of these attacks on such high-profile targets in Belgrade?
Well, NATO has been threatening for some days that it's going to take the war into downtown Belgrade. They have done this in order to bring pressure to bear on the Serbian government to desist from its attacks on Kosovo Albanians in Kosovo. I don't think destroying empty buildings in downtown Belgrade is going to help the plight of the refugees.
It's a gesture.
Well, it's a symbolic gesture to bring home to the people of Belgrade that they cannot carry on in the way they are carrying on in Kosovo. But if the Allies really want to halt activities in Kosovo, they are going to have to increase the amount of targeting of Serbian troops in Kosovo. That's going to be very difficult because of the weather and because of the mixture of those forces amongst Albanian civilians.
But quite apart from the huge humanitarian effort, which is quite clearly needed right now, they're also going to have to take ground troops in, aren't they?
Well, let us look at the argument for you relying solely on air power. So far, it has failed. And if it is going to work, well, then it's going to be the triumph of hope over experience, because never before has air power in itself been able to achieve an objective. But, on the other hand, so far we've only seen it may not seem like this to the Serbs, but a moderate air assault. There have been less attacks since the beginning of this operation than there were on the first 24 hours of the assault on Iraq during the Persian Gulf War.
What are the risks of ground intervention?
Well, the risks of ground intervention, in my opinion, are threefold. Firstly, there's a logistical problem, which will be extremely difficult to overcome. But assuming that is overcome, then you're going to have to fight quite a difficult war in Serbia, which will result in casualties, and the West is extremely vulnerable to casualties. And thirdly, a point that tends to be overlooked so far is the reaction of the Russians. Milosevic has yet to play his Russian card. If NATO starts building up its forces for a ground attack around Kosovo, the Russians may be forced to react in some manner.
For the moment, we'll discuss that later, but no, thank you. There's chaos on the borders of Kosovo itself. Tens of thousands of people who fled their homes are living out in the open. Aid agencies are overwhelmed. A third of Kosovo's population are now thought to be refugees. The United Nations describes the situation as a catastrophe. They say the number of refugees flooding into Albania, Macedonia and Montenegro is reaching nightmare proportions. Ben Brown reports from Macedonia, which has said it can no longer cope with the exodus.
The border between Kosovo and Macedonia has become one vast and sprawling refugee camp. It could be a scene from the heart of Africa, but this is the heart of modern Europe. Tens of thousands are now here, tens of thousands more are on their way. Women are giving birth, and many of the refugees are desperately ill, but most cannot get medical help. Aid workers are not allowed into the no man's land where these people are now stranded. Neither the Serbs nor the Macedonians will let relief teams work here. So there's virtually no food either, and when some does eventually turn up, delivered by local people, refugees scramble for just a single loaf. They haven't eaten for days. The young are sometimes trampled in a stampede for food, while the old are left to